This program contains coarse language.
Good evening. Welcome to Q&A. I'm Tony Jones. Joining us tonight, award-winning Australian musician Matt Colwell, who's better known as Rapper 360. Celebrated star of stage and screen, Miranda Tapsell, best known for her roles in The Sapphires and Redfern Now. English physicist Brian Cox has taken his love of science to a mass audience with documentaries such as Wonders of Life and Human Universe. Australian Laureate Fellow and Professor of Mathematics Nalini Joshi, and conductor and long-time champion of music education Richard Gill. Please welcome our panel. Thank you very much. Q&A is simulcast on ABC News 24, News Radio and Australia Plus, and you can join the Twitter conversation by using the Quanda hashtag, and if you've got a live question, add @Quanda to help us find it. We asked our Facebook followers what we should discuss on Q&A tonight. You favoured racism, Ebola and the wonders of the universe. Well, our first question comes from Martine Barry.
Good evening. My question is a simple one. Are we alone in the universe? And what evidence, as a scientist, mathematician or artist, do you have to support your view?
Brian, we'll start with you.
I have no evidence to start with. Are we alone? I suspect that there may be microbes around all over the place. As I say, we found no life beyond Earth, but we're trying very hard to look for life on Mars. There are two big joint European-Russian missions going over the next few years, which are aiming specifically at drilling below the surface because we think there may be pockets of liquid water on Mars. We know there was water on Mars at some point in its past, so we strongly suspect that there may have been life and possibly may still be life. But there's a different answer, I think, if you ask about complex life, complex living things. And what I find interesting is when you ask astronomers, they will say, well, surely there are other civilizations out there in the Milky Way. Recent data suggests there are something like 20 billion Earth-like planets or potential Earth-like planets at the right distance from stars to have liquid water on the surface. So an astronomer will say there are billions of potentially habitable worlds, there must be. But when I ask biologists, many of them will say yes, but if you look at the history of life on Earth, it took 3.8 billion years to get a civilization. And that is a long time. It's a third of the age of the universe, roughly speaking. So you ask the question, how many of those planets are stable enough? How many of those solar systems are stable enough? How many of those stars? What about the process of evolution? It took over 3 billion years to throw up anything more complex than a single cell on Earth. So it could be that civilizations are very rare.
So, very rare, but who do you side with in this possibility of intelligent life? Because people don't really want to hear about microbes trapped in Martian ice,
but it would be
big shed from asteroids and so on. They want to know if there's people like us out there, or even not like us, but intelligent life.
They do, and Arthur C. Clarke, the famous... There are no politicians on the panel. Arthur C. Clarke, the famous Nobelist, said that there are two possibilities. Either we are alone or we are not. And both of those possibilities terrify me. And it's true. We may be the only civilization in the Milky Way. That actually, I think, would be important to know for us, but politically, theologically, philosophically. But if they're not, then we will. How will we know? We have to listen. We have to look for signs of other civilizations.
Nalini, as a mathematician, what are the odds?
Martine, I think there's also the possibility of uninhabitable planets that may have life on it. We just have to have a bigger imagination, I think, to find those. And I have no idea whether there is civilized life in sulfuric environments where there's no oxygen, but it is a possibility. If there are infinite universes, then there's a possibility that there is life out there.
You probably wouldn't want to have dinner with them.
No. I may be dinner for some of them.
Can I ask you this? Because the question could also be construed in another way, as in, does God exist? Because then we wouldn't be alone in the universe.
But I really don't think we are alone in the universe. I don't know that God has God is the only framework within which we can talk about this issue. I mean, when I think about those, I think it's bacteria that live in these sulfur-rich environments that's coming out of the volcanic vents underneath the oceans, and those were only discovered about 30 years ago. People wouldn't have imagined that they existed before then. So I don't know. I mean, even on Earth, we have multiple forms of life, and why not anywhere else? And
that might well have been where life began. Many of the theories of the origin of life now suggest they may have been around those vents, those deep-sea vents, 3.8, 3.9 billion years ago.
Richard, do you think there's life in the universe somewhere, intelligent life beyond us?
I haven't the faintest idea, but...
I'd be surprised if you did, but you might have an opinion anyway.
Yes.
No, you'd be surprised, I would be amazed. What I do love is hearing conversations like this. I love hearing people like Brian and Nalini talk about this because I feel privileged to be in company which enhances and increases my knowledge and makes me want to know more. The God thing is a worry, but the microbes, I can get off on the microbes in the sulfuric stuff. I love that. So thank you for enriching my understanding.
Matt, what do you think?
I reckon there definitely is. Yeah, I like to think that there is.
You aren't in contact with any intelligent life form outside of the...
Have you ever heard of a drug called DMT?
Oddly enough, I've heard about it, yes.
We're not alone.
Just going back to that God question, do you believe in God? I noticed there's a lyric there, I don't believe in God, but yo, I pray to him.
I reckon God is just a word, a metaphor for the universe. It just means everything, you know, like, I'm not really religious in any way, but I believe just the word God is misconstrued to, like, people think that it's some sort of being, where I just think it means everything, you know.
Miranda, what do you think?
I think there is too. Well, I'd like to think there is. Maybe I've just watched too many space films or something like that, but I believe that... I just love the possibility of something being out there. What
about closer to home? Deborah Mailman, your fellow star in the Sapphires, says she believes there's a spirit world. In fact, she's in touch with them. They whisper in her ear, the spirits of her ancestors. I mean, do you feel like that?
Well, I don't like someone telling me that when someone is gone, they're gone. I always like to believe that the people that have been a part of my life follow me somewhere, not in a creepy stalker way, just... just
I certainly hope not.
No, but I always like to believe that they exist beyond life.
Well, energy never dies.
Is that true, Brian? I've got an expert here, I can ask you.
Energy is a conserved quantity, yes. That's true.
Very good. Which law of thermodynamics is that?
Oh, well, but the ghost said that they may well contravene the second law of thermodynamics.
Well, what about multi-universes, though? Because if what you believe in, and you do believe in multi-universes, or you think that's a strong possibility, if they exist, then is it possible that alongside us there is another world with people like us, or what other people might construe to be spirits? That's a trope.
Not the last bit.
That's a trope in science fiction.
But it's true that there are theories which have more dimensions than the 4 dimensions that we live in at the moment. And you can tell, I'm going to steal your notes, so I'll give you them back in a minute. But we can't picture 4 dimensions or 5 dimensions in our head. But you can imagine that we live on a sheet, 2-dimensional sheet. So just imagine that we compress 2 dimensions down like that. Well, there are theories that suggest that the universe could be like this room, and we could be confined to a sheet. And there can be other sheets. I'm going to mess these up and mix them all up. They're moving around. And there are some of those theories suggest that it's collisions between those sheets that caused or led to what we see as a Big Bang, because they can collide and then this heats up and expands and cools ever since. So there are theories like that.
Well, that one is actually very much like this room because it's got the names of all our questioners on it.
Yes, I'm going to not lose that one.
Let's in fact go to another question. The next one is from John McCallum.
Hello. My question is for Brian. Your new program is about humanising cosmology, but the history of science since Copernicus is about moving us away from the centre of things. So how important do you think the human species is in the grand scheme of the universe?
It's a very good question. I mean, the demotion of the Earth from the centre of the universe to what is undoubtedly an insignificant speck. You know, if you think about the fact that we've discovered there are 200 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy, perhaps 350 billion galaxies in the observable universe. But in the series, I call that an ascent into insignificance, an ascent, because it's a tremendous intellectual ascent to move us from the centre to actually measuring our coordinates in space and time.
An ascent into insignificance.
Yes, an ascent into insignificance. It's an intellectual ascent into insignificance. And so, but the answer to the final part of your question depends on the previous question, really. How rare are civilizations? And of course, the correct answer is we don't know, except we don't see any evidence at the moment for them. We've listened a bit. We have SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, never detected a signal, never detected any evidence of any alien civilization. We haven't looked that hard. So I think that our value, to me, lies in the fact that a species has arisen on this planet that, first of all, has measured the age of our bit of the universe, at least, to 13.798 plus or minus 0.035 billion years. That's not bad in 400 years. We've gone from the centre of the universe to knowing our place in space and time in 400 years, and that's impressive.
OK, I'm going to go straight to our third question, which is from Anita Aronson.
Hi. I'm just actually wondering, I've always wanted to time travel, and I thought, well, if somebody in the future, like maybe in 1,000,000 or 1,000 years, could figure out how to build a time machine, then why can't they come back to 2014 and then show us how to build it?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to answer that one as well.
Well, you know, we spoke about this, actually. I think we agree on this. It's
Yes, we do.
no, you can't travel into the past. I'm certain of that.
Well, could you explain why? Nalini, we'll start with you.
Well, I don't know about whether there's an arrow that prevents you from going to the past or only into the future. But mathematically, I think that there are many, many possible answers to these questions. If I may, you know, if you take just a three-dimensional cube and you look at one corner of this three-dimensional cube and then you compress one corner down to the diagonally opposite corner, then what you do is you flatten the cube and it becomes a hexagon. If you take that structure, which is hexagonally symmetric, it turns out that these types of symmetries are in crystals, and there are a very few number of these regular symmetries that are exhibited in crystals in 2 dimensions. Now, if you think about increasing the number of dimensions, now go to 3, 4, 5, 6, presto, around 7 and 8, there are exceptional new structures that come up that only exist when you get to 7 and 8 and maybe 9 dimensions. Now,
are you following this?
Like maths. I'm starting to hyperventilate because you're talking maths.
I'm sorry. But I'm just saying that we're living in what we think is a 4-dimensional world, where time is one of the dimensions. But there are many, many possible structures in many, many dimensions which could give rise to time travel if you knew how to navigate around the symmetries.
See, I
get it now. Brian.
First of all, it's certainly true to say that in Einstein's theory, where you've got 4-dimensional space, then you're prevented from travelling back in time, actually by the speed of light. It fits into the geometry in that way. You're right, though. You can imagine wormholes and these ideas that you can tunnel through and take shortcuts. It'd be like going from London to Australia by going through the Earth rather than around the 2-dimensional surface on the edge. So I've heard Stephen Hawking has a thing called the chronology protection conjecture, and the conjecture is, from a physics perspective, is that, as you say, it seems to make no sense. It's not a way to build a universe to allow you to be able to travel back in time and prevent your parents from meeting before you're born or whatever you do. So there's a conjecture that the laws of nature will always be such that time travel into the past is forbidden. Now, that's a conjecture at the moment. It's true in what's called Einstein's special theory of relativity, and it might be true or not in his general theory. We're not sure because you can have these shortcut things. But I think most theoretical physicists would say we'll conjecture, as Stephen Hawking does, that the physics protects the past.
Can I just say then that logic suggests that even if you can travel into the future, we'll never know.
Or you can travel into the future.
Yes, but
even in Einstein's theory, as far as you want.
Yes, but no one will actually do it because it would require a great scientific effort and a lot of money. But no one would ever be able to prove
we do it.
that they'd been in the future.
It's been proved. So moving clocks run slow.
Has it been proved?
Yes, moving clocks run slow relative to stationary ones. So if you were to run across this studio now and run back and sit down, and we measured the time on your watch very accurately, it would your watch relative to mine would have run slower. And that's actually central to the way the satellite navigation system works. It requires to be so that's true, and that's part of Einstein's theory.
But you couldn't, or you wouldn't. Let's say the scientific community wouldn't do this. Take a human being and try and put them into the future.
I'd do it.
Because what would be the point of it?
Well, no, you do that. You just do. But if you, let's say you fly, I know a number, which is the speed the protons go around the Large Hadron Collider. Mm-hmm. So they go around the Large Hadron Collider at 99.999999% the speed of light. At that speed, time passes 7,000 times more slowly for the protons than it does for the experimenters sat watching them going round, and that's relativity. So every time someone gets on a rocket and goes to the moon and comes back, their time will have passed slightly more slowly than the people on Earth. Therefore, they'll have gone into the future.
Now, I'm just going to go, well, first of all... Just forget about those 3 letters and that drug that you were talking about earlier. But are you disappointed to find you can't go back in time? Because presumably, if you could, there might be something you'd like to change.
No, I don't think I'd want to travel back in time and change things. Like that whole butterfly effect movie scared me from that. You know, like every action has a reaction and stuff like that. But I'd definitely travel into the future. If someone had a fucking machine and just sent me off, I'd go.
We'd never know if you made it because you couldn't come back and tell us.
Nah, that's the thing, mate.
Miranda, would you like to travel in time were the opportunity made available?
I think the thing I'd really like to see in the future is where we've moved forward to as a society. I think that would be one thing I'd really look forward to exploring. How people view other minorities in society, how we all treat one another. Is there world peace? I'd love that. But I think I would miss all the people that in this time.
I think everyone would. Richard, you got
I'm not the slightest bit interested in travelling into the future. I have enough trouble with the present.
Yeah. OK, let's move along. Our next question comes from Diane McDonald.
It's not a science question, sorry. The National Curriculum Review Panel consisted largely of 3 almost dead white males. No classroom teachers, no women who dominate the teaching profession were involved in the panel. The review actually ignored decades of significant research into education and the progress that we have made. So, how can our education system afford this way that students are now being forced to move backwards to the 1950s in perhaps Brian Cox's time travel system, rather than education moving into the 21st century?
Richard, a few valued judgments there. What do you think?
OK, I think you make a really good point about the national curriculum. The point I would say about the national curriculum is this. There is no point in having any curriculum unless you have teachers who can actually teach it and unless you value teachers. And the thing that we haven't done in this country is value teachers. We actually don't. The second thing I would say is this, that I've been teaching for 52 years and I've seen 7 iterations of the curriculum, nationally and state curriculum, etc. And basically nothing changes. People just write more words that mean less. And teachers do not have the time to read ridiculous documents. And an example of that would be the arts curriculum, which is currently 140 pages long. No generalist teacher in a primary school can teach all of those subjects at any level. And in a more complete answer to your question, that was partially reviewed by the principal of Sydney Grammar, John Vallance. And John has been widely misinterpreted, where he said, he has been reported as saying that music and visual art should have their content diminished, which is absolutely not true. That's not what he's saying. The very first statement in his review is, and I've written it out, as currently constituted, the Australian curriculum documents for the arts are too long, diffuse and tendentious to be comprehensible to students or to parents who want to know what their children are learning. And he's right. He's absolutely right. He's not suggesting anything be cut in the arts at all. He's suggesting things be moved around. The real issues come with things like literacy and numeracy and the iniquitous NAPLAN. And that has to go. That has to go. Because NAPLAN is a gift to the lazy teacher and a deep frustration to the creative teacher. So my view is this. When I talk to teachers about curriculum, I say to teachers, you are the best curriculum. You know what your children can do. You know how they are learning. You test them all the time. So there is no substitute for a properly trained teacher in front of a group of kids teaching.
But then how do we as a teacher get our voices heard?
You have to keep at it. And I'm going to give you an example. Diane, today we heard, if I may, Tony, some fantastic news from this federal government. Brandis and Pyne, Senator Brandis and Minister Pyne, have given the music education sector almost $600,000 to start a mentorship program for the training of music teachers from kindergarten to grade 6. So we're having all over the country, there are fabulous music teachers we can identify who will look after other teachers. Now, and I've been banging on about this for years and years and years. And that's what teachers have to do. You've got to bang on. You've just got to keep lobbying. No, but you do.
Bang on.
And I mean that in the nicest... I thought, I'm not going to look over there. And I did.
You might have to eventually, because we probably need to get your attention and go to another panellist.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I bang on. That's what you do.
Nalini. Well, we could. I mean, we have to say it's probably quite wrong to say those men are almost dead. We won't say that. They are men of a certain age, and we can say that.
And I think there are only 2 of them, not 3,
one died.
unless one has.
Maybe one.
I'm sorry.
Not while we've been speaking, right?
No. But in terms of the mathematics side of things, I think it was widely acknowledged that the national curriculum is jam-packed with material. There is so much material in there that there is no logical way that teachers could cover it in any one particular year. So if I can put that aside for a moment from the review, which has just happened, the review, although it was conducted by these 2 people, I think it was Professor Ken Wiltshire and Dr. Kevin Donnelly, what they did was they hired or recruited subject experts to come in and give them feedback about individual subjects. And that's what happened in mathematics. And the Australian Association of Mathematics Teachers had a huge voice in that review process. The Mathematics Association of New South Wales had another big voice. And so teachers are being heard through those kinds of organisations. I think some of the discussion that went on had to be done.
Nalini, if I can take you out of your discipline for a moment. I mean,
Yes.
Among many other things, the report wants greater focus in history in particular, on Western civilisation and Australia's Judeo-Christian heritage, and also says that Indigenous issues, engagement with Asia, sustainability are wrongly embedded in every subject, and they're cluttering up the curriculum. I mean, these are some of the more controversial aspects of what the report say.
Yes, they are, and I completely disagree with that. I mean, they should be in the curriculum somewhere. They should be there because we need the context in which we live and learn to have meaningful engagement with the subject matter.
Well, they seem to be suggesting they're everywhere in the curriculum, not just somewhere, but everywhere, embedded in the curriculum.
Well, they are. They are.
Well, I think it's not bad to have some of it somewhere. I'm not saying that they should be universally everywhere, but in the... I can't get away from mathematics, I'm sorry. If you think about mathematics, you know, you have to learn counting first, and then you go to...
We have got a terrific question on that coming up, so we'll come back to you on that subject.
Sorry.
Miranda, what do you think? I mean, the idea, for example, that Indigenous issues are embedded through the entire educational system in every subject in some way, shape or form, and are cluttering up the curriculum. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Oh, I think that's silly. I think that the content of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander in the curriculum, it needs to be in there. Sorry, I'll word that again. I want that to be in the curriculum because it's going to inform our students about people like me and to make it more accessible, and rather than shutting that aspect of Australia out. That's just happened for a very long time, and now that it's finally been introduced and celebrated in our school, we need to keep it there. That's just my opinion.
I've got a related question here, a question related to this topic. It's from Lee DeHaan.
Hi. Professor Barry Spur, who is supposed to be reviewing the school curriculum, was caught sending racist emails, and a new border protection video has been released, which is a disgusting portrayal of asylum seekers. Isn't it time for people to stand up and show the world that not all of Australia is racist?
Matt Colwell.
Definitely, yeah. Spot on. There's so many racist bigots in this country, and they're everywhere. And it's like, I don't know about, like I was talking to someone earlier about this, but the Australian flag to me has now become, I identify that with racism. Does anyone else?
Well, that's going to be a pretty controversial statement out there. I mean, why do you say that to start with?
Like, on Australia Day, you see a bunch of dudes walking around with their tops off and they're getting on the drink and all that. They've got an Australian flag wrapped around their neck. I've seen it so many times. Like, I've been in a taxi where we've pulled up because these dickheads have been walking across the road, and they just start yelling at the taxi driver, like, get out of the country, this is not your country, you know what I mean? And they're wearing Australian flags. Like, I've seen it so much, like, growing up. Still today, you know what I mean? It's pathetic.
Do you see yourself having a role in challenging this? Because you've actually written in one of your latest songs, I don't want to have fans that are racist pigs. That's quite a heavy line.
It's true. I don't like.
I mean, do you feel like you do?
I think that definitely, yeah. I think in hip hop in this country, I think there is a lot of racist people in hip hop. It's not all, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying everyone is, but there is. And if you are, I don't want them people at my shows. I don't want anything to do with them.
Miranda, do you think education plays a serious role in dealing with this issue?
I think it does, because when people learn about Indigenous culture here in Australia, I think they begin to realise that it is a part of their identity, you know, that you might not be Indigenous yourself, but you live in Australia, you live on this soil. So if you shut that aspect out of Australia, you're kind of denying Australia's real identity, in my opinion. Because I'm constantly asked as an Indigenous woman, why can't you just call yourself Australian? And So then I feel like I'm given this massive ultimatum where I have to choose between whether I'm Aboriginal or whether I'm Australian. Why can't I be both? Why can't that be a part of it?
I'm going to bring Brian in here, and I mean, obviously there is racism in Great Britain. It's not a racism-free zone, but perhaps more evolved in some respects. But are you shocked to hear someone on this panel tonight suggest the flag itself has a role in this?
No, we have the same debate in Britain. The Union Jack, that flag, part of your flag, has been used by... It's nationalism, I think. And one of the ugly faces of nationalism is racism, it's xenophobia. That's always been a part of nationalism. And I think that's what tends to connect it to national flags. And I don't think that's an Australian disease at all. I think it's pretty much universal, actually.
Yeah. Is it being dealt with in a different way in Britain?
No, I think it's the same way. It's a cultural fight. You have to do it through legislation as well as education, I think, and that's what we've done in Britain. We've had a Race Relations Act. I don't know whether you do have a similar thing here. So it's an aggravating factor in offences, so that you can have racially aggravated assault, for example, and I think that's been necessary in Britain. And I think you're right, attitudes have changed. It's clear, and it must be the same here as well. If you go back to the 1970s, there's a very famous issue at the moment. There are sitcoms that were made in the 1970s, much loved on the BBC, that are not repeated. Why? Because they've become essentially unacceptable. So I think that transition has to be... There's a lot of weapons at your disposal to make that transition to a more reasonable society in this respect. But it's certainly not just an Australian problem.
Nalini, that question has started off referring to the Barry Spur emails, which everyone by now has probably some sense of, at least. Quite shocking in many respects. But he claimed, of course, they were just playing with words between friends.
Well, as you know, I'm an employee of the University of Sydney. So it's very difficult for me to comment on a case which is still under investigation by the University of Sydney. But what I can comment on is my personal opinion and my personal experience in Australia. And I think racism is one end of the spectrum of all behaviours that discriminate against people on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of sexuality, gender, and ends at the other end, perhaps, or whether or not it has an end, I don't know. But at the other end, I can see influences into bullying in the workplace and bullying in the schoolyard. In my personal experience, we've had a lot, my family and I, we've had a lot of these kinds of incidences in our lives. I was born in Burma, where being from an ethnically Indian background meant that we were the rejected group, or one of the rejected groups. My father was conscripted into the army because he was a professional from an Indian ethnic background and sent to far-flung places so that such people wouldn't be combining together to create dissent of some kind that the regime was threatened by. And when we came to Australia, we thought this was a paradise of freedom and equality. But perhaps I can just give you one example. Just a few months ago, I was walking down the street near my workplace, and this very respectable lady, not at all a bare-chested man wearing a flag, a very respectable middle-aged lady came the other way, was looking at me, so I thought, oh, perhaps she's going to ask me for directions. She looked at me and she spat out, "You're a disgrace to your culture." And I went, whoa, where did that come from? I don't know. I think I can only describe it in terms of feeling insecure about her place in this society or in this culture. And I tried to make a joke of it. Maybe it was because I was wearing a T-shirt with, 1,000 digits of pi written on it. Actually, it's actually, pi has an infinite decimal expansion. You can't truncate it. So she was objecting.
That's not disgraceful. I'm just going to quickly go back to Matt, because I heard you say "and sexuality" there, and of course hip-hop is famously homophobic, and indeed even some of your earlier lyrics, "The devil wore Prada, must be a faggot."
I used to use homophobic slurs all the time in battle rap, every day talking to my mates and stuff like that. And I was young, I was very ignorant, you know, and then I got interviewed by a gay man, and he said to me, do you understand your power with kids and how much influence you have on these kids? And you're saying a word like faggot, and it teaches them that it's okay. And then ever since then, it just changed me, you know what I mean? I think the only way you can beat ignorance is with education. And ever since then, I've realised the position that I was in, and I was a role model for young kids. So I want to be a positive one, you know. I don't want to be a negative one. So that just changed everything for me after that. You know, I realised I was ignorant. I realised that was stupid, but I grew up and moved on.
Let's move on ourselves to a totally different subject of mathematics. And the question is from Mary Smith. Yes, Mary.
Having taught maths for all of my professional career, I just hope that I've managed to make many boys and girls love mathematics as much as I do. Therefore, it really annoys me when people, with a considerable amount of pride, say, I hate maths, or I was never any good at it. And I just wondered whether the panel had any ideas on how we could change that attitude.
All right, quick answer from Nalini, because you've given us a fair bit on maths now, but I am interested to know how you actually encourage people, you know, a bit like me, maybe some others who think mathematics is sort of beyond them.
Well, I point out that this is a myth, that if they like music, they like singing, they like rhythm, they're already doing mathematics, because the patterns of rhythm are just the patterns you see in, you know, numbers and fractions and mathematics. But I think actually that in more recent times, I've come to the view that we should be engaging kids in more physical, spatial, and other ways. For example, I've been very much taken up by the idea of transformational play as an educational tool. You know, everybody is using video games nowadays. My children certainly do. And the video game as a mechanism for delivering information is absolutely amazing. If you go into this world where you've got a certain avatar that you can choose for yourself, and you can change the environment that you are walking around in, and you're asked to carry, say, a sphere of ice, and then as you're walking through the landscape, the ice will melt, and you have to capture a certain minimum amount at the other end. Then you have to know something about the volume of ice, something about how long it takes you to get there, what volume of liquid will remain, and you're actually doing mathematics along the way. But doing it in that way is so powerful that I feel we should all be thinking about these different ways of engaging kids that gives them the power to learn.
Let's ask Brian, The Wonders of Mathematics, a documentary series.
Well, I was going to say, there's a deeper issue perhaps that reveals in our cultures. It's the same, I think, in the UK and in Australia, which is that it's acceptable for, let's say, a politician or someone in power to say, well, of course, I don't understand that science, that mathematics stuff. And that's the thing that's wrong. It should be as unacceptable as a politician saying, well, I don't like books. Maybe they do, but you know, maybe they get away with it. But, you know, I've never read a novel. I've never listened to anything. I don't like that classical music stuff. You know, that's not acceptable. And I think it's a historical throwback, in a sense, to the days when being really cultured was about knowing about the arts, which is very valuable. But you didn't have to know about the foundation of our modern civilization, which is mathematics and science. And I think what we need to do is we need a cultural shift, I hope, where it's just not acceptable. We need to be educated across the board. That's not to denigrate the arts, it's to try and bring science up in the cultural language, as it were, and mathematics.
Now, you two are both musical, so I'm going to ask how good you were at mathematics and whether you sort of got it. Miranda, you first.
My maths teacher just gave up on me.
So did mine, and he was my dad. He got me through to a certain level, and then he advised me to leave off.
Yeah, so did my parents. They just went, oh, you go to a tutor.
But listen to this. Do you think you've missed out on something? Because I certainly do.
I think I missed out on something great. I think because I don't read music, I listen to it by ear. So to understand it through that way, through the rhythm of maths and looking beyond the symbols, I think I would have a greater understanding of so many other things, I think.
It's never too late.
Matt, it's never too late, apparently. So how about for you? I mean, you are musical.
Yeah.
So apparently it's innate in you somehow, mathematics.
See, I never like thought of like timing and stuff like that when rapping. I never thought of that as being mathematical. I always think about like algebra and what does x equal and all that. And I was terrible at maths. Like I just I don't know. There was something about it that I just couldn't compute.
Do you think it's just because you weren't inspired by somebody?
I think so. Yeah, I think I just didn't have an interest in it as a child. You know.
Let's actually find out from Richard whether, as a musician yourself, as a composer, I beg your pardon, as a conductor, mathematics is obviously all through classical music, Bach, Beethoven, deeply mathematical. Are you?
No. But I want to answer the question because I think it's a really good question. What you see in Nalini is an example of a good teacher. And if I were in Nalini's maths class, I'd be in love with maths. And I reckon if I were in your maths class, I'd be in love with maths. And if you've got a teacher who is on top of the subject, who can inspire the kids, they can teach them anything. And I watch, when I was teaching music and demonstrating, like teaching music, I used to work with a kindergarten class, and they had this fantastic kindergarten teacher, and she would come in and she'd say, "Everybody," and the kids would go, "We're going to do add-ups." And the kids go, "Wah!" They were on fire with addition, you know? So what you see here is a great maths teacher. And if you've got a great teacher, you've got to get kids who love the subject.
Someone who's passionate.
I'm going to say too, because I've realised what I've said about my father. He was a great maths teacher. He just got stuck with me.
But Tony, there are also people who have difficulties in learning.
Oh, thank you very much. I think we better move on. Our next question is from Igor Vive.
Well, I was lucky enough in my youth to witness a UFO, so I need no further convincing about the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. But there seems to be, to my knowledge at least, very little evidence of successful communication. And if mathematics is the key to understanding our natural world, and indeed understanding the universe, it seems logical that it would also be the common language to communicate with any extraterrestrial intelligence. So if you were to draft such a mathematical message, what would it convey? And alternatively, if it's not mathematics, could music be?
Can you explain your UFO experience?
It goes back to 1975, south of France, Department of Correes, cigar-shaped object, very bright, stayed for 5 minutes and disappeared in a flash much faster than anything else
So you weren't taken up and experimented on. That is a relief. I'm going to go...
No DMT involved.
How would one communicate with these cigar-shaped objects? Brian, is there some sort of mathematical message you could give to alien life? And do you believe in these cigar-shaped UFO objects?
No. Putting that aside, the fact that you can't explain an observation doesn't lead you to suppose that there's an intelligent civilization building spacecraft. You should leave it at the fact you can't explain what you saw. Human fallibility is probably the likely explanation, so I would say. However, you're right that, not just your fallibility, of course, our visual systems are prone to errors, and that's a more likely explanation, I think. But you're right, mathematics is the language of communication that we've tried. We have beamed a message, at least one, from the Arecibo telescope. We sent the Voyager probes out that are now at the edge of the solar system with golden discs on it. They were launched in 1977. It's interesting, actually, the technology moves on. So they're records, golden records. And on them, they contain the instructions on how to build a record player to play the record. And that's done in the language of mathematics. You have to find some way of decoding the signal. In that case, physics comes in as well. There's something called the 21 centimetre hydrogen line, which is the wavelength that hydrogen atoms radiate. And that will be a length which is universal. So you can use keys like that with physical processes of mathematics to encode any message, and that's what was done on the Voyager spacecraft.
So, just out of interest, do we send music pure and simple without lyrics?
No, we sent sounds of Earth, we sent pictures. Carl Sagan, actually, the great astronomer, had a great deal of say in what went on the record. It was an afterthought. And there's actually the Pioneer probes before it had one. And this shows you the state of our strange kind of human-centric view of the world. So on the Pioneer probes, there's a man and a woman stood there, so it's the biology. And the woman has her genitalia blurred out so as not to cause offence. And it's like, what? You wonder what these people were thinking. You know, it's like an alien civilization goes, "That's smut!" You know, very strange. But the man, of course, has the full regalia there.
That is quite strange, though, isn't it?
That's America in the 70s.
What do we do these days? I mean, we send entire box sets of TV shows. I mean, how does it work?
We haven't sent a message for a long time, actually. And there is some debate.
Is that because we're getting a bit nervous about it?
There's some debate. Some astronomers say, well, why should we broadcast our position?
And aren't our signals going out already?
Well, they are in terms of, although we're becoming quieter, which is interesting, because we used to have these big television transmitters. Now we have satellites that face downwards. We have the internet and optical fibres. So actually your civilization does go through a period of brightness and then gets a bit quieter again. I should say the new telescope that's being built, partly in Australia, the big new radio telescope, that's going to have the sensitivity to detect an aircraft landing radar within, it's a huge radius, 100 light years or more, I think. So it will be able to, it's not its main purpose, but we're getting so sensitive now with the radio telescopes that we'll be able to detect just runways light years away.
So I'm just going to go back to something you just said there, just to complete the picture. I mean, are defence intelligence people or strategic defence people involved in this decision-making process and making the case we don't want to give away our position, as you just put it?
I don't think so. I think it's just, it's not particularly a particularly fashionable use of radio telescopes now to beam messages out, because it's very likely that no one will pick them up.
Richard, if we did send music out into the universe, what would you send?
Oh, examples of everything. I mean, all sorts of examples, going right back from where we actually started to think about music and, in the 9th century, where we could sort of trace records, and then to the very first rappers, the troubadours of the 12th and 13th century, who were the first rappers. Six and I were having a conversation about this.
Six.
2 pi.
I prefer 2 pi.
2 pi's just
2
short
pi,
of
you
6,
see,
isn't
mathematics does seem to be seeping in somewhere. If you're now calling yourself 2 pi, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's just been pointed out, that's greater than 6.
Would you, if you had the chance to send a rap out into the universe, what would it be?
I'd send...
Hey, Grin Man, you feel me?
I'd send my whole discography. I'd send all my mixtapes, all my albums, and hopefully someone replies and says, I love it, mate.
Do you know,
and unlike on this planet, someone might even pay for it.
Yeah.
I was told by a friend who knew George Harrison that apparently the NASA wanted to put Here Comes the Sun on the disc. And without the knowledge of George, the copyright holder, the EMI, turned it down and said, you can't do it because you haven't got universal copyright. And he was apparently extremely annoyed when he found out that his song had not been sent out there because copyright issues.
There's a couple EMI reps over here.
I'm very reluctant to do it, but I think we'll go on to the next question. It's from Kieran O'Connor.
Hi, my question is to the eminent Brian Cox. If 97% of engineers said a bridge was going to fall down and 3% said it was going to stay up, it would be a little absurd to listen to that 3%. Then why is it that 97% of scientists believe that climate change is occurring, yet few in the community and even less in the government choose to accept this fact. Is this a problem with communication by scientists or a problem with ignorant non-scientists advocating distorted facts?
I think there's a misunderstanding as to what scientific statements are. There's a very simple question, of course, with climate change. Is if you consider putting this amount of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, CO2 and other gases, then does the climate react? And if so, how does it react? That's obviously a sensible question to ask. The only way you can answer that is to make measurements and to model the climate as best you can. It's the best you can do. What else can you do? You can read tea leaves, do tarot cards, I don't know, guess. Well, you can't do anything else. So that's what we do, that's science. Now, the predictions come back and they have large errors on them. I'm not sure what the current range is. If we carry on, it's something like 1.7 to 4.5 degree temperature rise by 2100, I think, depending on the assumptions you make. So there's a big range of errors. But the point is, if you understand what a scientific statement is, then you can't argue with that prediction. There is nothing else you can do. Science is always preliminary. So it's not to be seen as we're not to be seen as a priesthood, which I think sometimes we are. And maybe that's a problem that we have in communicating, that, I'm a scientist and I'm telling you that this is going to happen if you carry on doing that, therefore you should do this. That's not the way to do it.
Well, the skeptics invoke Galileo, though. They say that there's always the chance that everyone else is wrong and I'm right. Galileo proves it.
Science is never right. The power of science is it's the only human system of thought I can think of that accepts its own fallibility. The great Jacob Brodowski in The Ascent of Man said that. He said that it's the expression of our humanity because it's the one discipline that understands its own fallibility, just like we are fallible. But that's the point. The point is that science is the best you can do at any given point. So you've got to act on it. Now, the policy actions are a different matter. Therefore, I think that's where the politicians come in and the democracy comes in. But I get very frustrated, as I'm sure you do, by asking the question, when people attack the science and the modelling in order to disagree with the policy action. I think that's where the problem lies.
Nalini, the modelling, of course, is based on mathematics, obviously, computer modelling. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about any other context in which modelling happens. Right now, for example, everybody's worried about Ebola and the doubling rate that's going on in many countries in West Africa. The latest mathematical models from the CDC show that if you can isolate or hospitalize 70% of the infected patients by December, then the epidemic will be over in January. So it gives you a measure of what you can do to finish, to make sure that the epidemic doesn't become a pandemic across the globe. So what does that lead to? It leads to a decision-making process where you have to decide what resources do you need to be able to hospitalize the 70% of infected patients that are expected by December. So it leads to all kinds of other branches. How many volunteers should you be sending? How many blankets and gowns and all of that should you send? So it gives you a measuring tool. It's a ruler for deciding how to make the action happen.
And it's the best one. It's the only one we have, essentially, isn't it?
Did that make you disappointed then that the Australian government decided not to send people because of the danger to them? Because they obviously wanted to. They took advice. The advice was those people could get infected and we wouldn't be able to bring them home in time for treatment.
Well, I don't know where the decision-making process is there right now. Have they decided not to send anybody, or have they?
Yeah, I mean, until they can guarantee, they say, until they can guarantee the safety of the health workers.
I think people should go anyway.
Let's move on. We've got quite a few questions still left, and they're all very interesting. We've got a question from Heather Lloyd.
Hi, I'm a classically trained music professional. I've been lucky enough to have the tutelage of Maestro Gill. And I also listen to a variety of genres of music, and I draw from all of them regularly, as does my brother. My brother was diagnosed schizophrenic when he was 18, and I know that he turns to hip-hop regularly as it brings him a sense of equanimity and calm. And I just wonder if the panel have any ideas as how we would implement a treatment program for people with mental health problems using music as a foundation.
Matt, do you have any thoughts about this?
There isn't there some treatment going on overseas at the moment of hip hop and mental health or something like that? They're trying to treat mental health by getting people to write their own raps and stuff like that. And I think it'd be amazing because I find like I've suffered from depression and anxiety my whole life, and I've found when I'm in my darkest times, if I write a song about what I'm going through, it just diminishes what I feel. So I think it's a really important thing if people want to go that route. It'd be great.
Was it depression and anxiety that caused you to turn to drugs, or was it, the possibilities of fame? Because you did have a pretty dark period there.
I was just a party animal, eh? Like when I was younger, I was just a big party animal, big drinker and stuff like that. And then one thing leads to another. You know what I mean? But I think the anxiety and stuff was more triggered by the partying, and I just wasn't anxious going through high school. When I started partying, really wrecking myself and drinking a lot, like it was more alcohol, I think, that really did some damage upstairs. I think alcohol is probably one of the worst drugs out of everything, I mean, there's an epidemic with ice going on at the moment, but alcohol is so bad. It's when you become an alcoholic and the damage that it does to you and the way people behave when they're drunk and shit is terrible.
I'm told we're almost out of time. I'm sorry to leave that there because there's a fair bit more to explore. But we do have our last question. Comes from Harold Jansen, and everyone can answer this one.
Professor Cox, in your series Human Universe, you addressed the question, why are we here? It seems to me you were trying to get at the question of whether there is a particular reason that life arose in the universe. But another way in which you can look at the question is in terms of purpose. That is, what is the point of life? What is the end goal of our existence? My question to you is, does life have a purpose?
Simple one to end with, Brian.
No, I don't think it does. The way that I meant, the why are we here is not a scientific question in some sense, but it can be a scientific question in cosmology if you're asking about theories that suggest that there may be more than one universe, and there are theories called eternal inflation theories that suggest that there are big bangs happening all the time. And they also suggest, those theories, perhaps, that's right, that the different universes can have all different values of things like the strengths of gravity and the speed of light and all those things that can be different. And so those theories sort of suggest that everything that can happen, happens. And in that sense, the answer to why are we here would be we're inevitable. We're here because we have to be here somewhere. Now, I'll stress that those theories are speculative. The ones about the inflation bit, the so-called inflation, I haven't got time to talk about that, but they're not speculative, they're textbook. But the idea, what you're talking about is something called teleology. And teleology has been a no-no in science for a long time. You want to respond?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, because I think of purpose, right, as like an end goal of how to utilize a thing. Like I got a hammer, like I know it's meant to be to drive nails into walls, so I know I'm supposed to swing it, not push it. I know I'm supposed to use it to drive things into the wall, not as a decoration or a stop, or whatever, doorstop or something. And so if I don't know, if life has no meaning, like we can't measure how, what it's going to be used for. We could be racist or not racist. It doesn't really matter because life has no purpose. But if you know life has a purpose, then we can orient our.
I strongly disagree with that, actually, just very quickly. I think that...
have to be quick, I'm afraid.
Being good,
that's
right,
it.
I think is a reason, is a thing in itself. We can be good human beings without some purpose or fear of retribution in some afterlife. We can we can just choose to be good.
So good,
yeah,
that means that's one purpose,
I'm going to have to take the rest of your comments as a comment.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yes, we've got time for quick answers from our panellists. Is there a purpose to life?
There is a
simple
purpose to life, and
you.
it's music.
Nalini, if you say there's a purpose and it's mathematics, I'll be disappointed.
I think the purpose to life is living.
Yes.
Every step is worth it.
Value it while you can. Value life while
Miranda.
I think it's about being kind and generous and doing what you can to make other people's lives better.
I think you agree with Brian there, more or less.
I think it's about finding something you're passionate about, being a good person, and just living that passion and doing everything you can to make the world a better place.
Well, we certainly found a lot of things that we're passionate about tonight. That was the purpose of the program. Please thank our panel. 360, Miranda Tapsell, Brian Cox, Nalini Joshi, Richard Gill. Thank you. Now, down to more pragmatic matters. So the Australian forces are already involved in combat against ISIS. Next Monday, we'll be joined by the Assistant Defence Minister, Stuart Robert, international human rights lawyer and author Geoffrey Robertson, the Shadow Minister for Health, Catherine King, the editor of The Spectator, Australia, Rowan Dean. So until next week's Q&A, good night.